As you probably all know, I'm Nina. Hello, from ACEWIC. So we welcome you today to our executive exchange with Paula. We want to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet across Victoria today and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be attending here today. So as I said, welcome. Thank you very much to Paula today for her time. Paula commenced her career as a social worker in London, having completed a social science degree in Dublin. Further study in organisational dynamics ignited a passion for understanding workplace behaviours, the challenges, the potential solutions that can embody positive, productive workplaces. Paula is particularly passionate about encouraging others to develop greater self-awareness, reflect on their strengths and limiting behaviours, and develop a mindful can-do approach to achieving success in all areas of life. We welcome Paula here today to our July ACEWIC Executive Exchange. So thank you, Paula. I also just wanted to mention that questions can be popped in the chat and we'll review those at the end. If there's anything that sort of is a standout, I might just interrupt you, Paula, but otherwise we'll address those at towards the end of our session today. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for the introduction, Nina, and delighted to be working with all of you. Obviously, I've done some research around your organisation and have enormous respect for the work you are doing. And yes, it certainly feels like privileged work to have the opportunity to spend some time with all of you. So you will notice in the next hour that you will be encouraged to hold the mirror up to what you're currently doing with the intent, and it's one of my favorite quotes, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. So that sense of why am I the way I am, and being mindful of that. So yeah, encouraging that reflection as we go through. And as Nina said, if there are any burning questions as we go through, we'll happily answer those. We will be scheduling 10 minutes at the end for any questions around any of the content that we are discussing. So I have a number of slides that I'll be talking through with you and getting you to do some activities as we journey through as well. And in terms of our learning outcomes and what we'll be covering off in the next while, I have it up there on the slide. So yes, I will be using quite a few slides. So the intent around this is at the end of this presentation, you will be more mindful of how you show up at work and the impact that has on other people. You'll have the opportunity to reflect on self-care practices and the impact that has on being able to respond rather than react to situations. You'll consider what you can do to build and maintain psychologically safe workplaces that embody high levels of trust. And we'll spend a little bit of time looking at reflecting on what team effectiveness looks like in your opinions and what can be done to nurture and embrace that. And then we'll also spend a little bit of time considering the importance of being more considered in your approach to delegation and coaching as part of team development and empowering others. So I am going to ask you now, and I will ask everyone to pop a comment onto the chat around this. Now, as I said, I would be asking you to hold the mirror up to yourselves. So there's a beautiful reflection going on there, always good for all of us to take some time to do things like that. Asking you to think about how do you show up at work and what is it like for others to be around you? So to think about that for a moment, and then whatever you feel comfortable putting onto the chat in relation to that. So I'll give you another minute, and ideally to pop something onto the chat. And ideally, again, thinking about the fairly consistent you, what's usually the person who does show up and what that's like for others. Now, you might never have asked anyone, or you may well have asked. Might be something you do after this. Okay, we'll have a quick look there under the chat. That's sounding very positive, Charmaine. Alison, you're mindful of being positive. Casey, easygoing. And Laura, yes, that's very, very powerful too. People tend to approach us when we do come across as friendly, welcoming, open and positive. And Rebecca, you've got steady and calm on there. Calm but busy. You, Henrietta, sounds like good self-awareness there. And a great goal for any of us, Sue, to have that, to be 100% present with what you're doing. Nina, positive, considered. Being supportive. And Patty, you're ready. My take from that is you're present, you're in the zone. And Mina, always welcoming. Henrietta, reassuring. And Philippa, that smile and never underestimating the impact that has. And Nathan, you're measured. So again, that sounds like good self-awareness, but you're never too far up or down. And yet a supportive, goal, positive, supportive. And Yana, seeing the glass is half full. Again, really powerful awareness to have. And Despina, that's trying to be calm. And I'm sure you're very aware too. Some days that's easier said than done. So thank you all for doing that. Great points on there. Now I'll pop up another slide encouraging you to delve a little bit deeper with this. So with all of those things in mind, encouraging you to think, would you consider yourself an active listener? And would you say you listen to understand, as opposed to listening to respond? And the worst one of all that we can do, listening to interrupt. Say someone asks you a question and they go to, you ask someone a question and they attempt to respond and you jump in with, no, that's not what happened. People are usually thinking, why did you even ask me? Whereas ideally that intent of listening to understand. And in terms of when you do ask people questions, do you have a balanced approach to asking open and closed questions? And being mindful, our closed questions, they can really help us to understand the facts with the situation. Well, when did that happen? How many people were there? Whereas our open questions, tell me a bit more about that. What do you think you'll do? So encouraging, do you have that balance? And as part of asking those questions, I really, really encourage people to be mindful of having a curious rather than a potentially furious tone. Say something hasn't gone so well, and you come to me and, well, Paula, why did you do that? That's not going to help us really in terms of being dynamic leaders and empowering others. Whereas, talk me through what happened. And without self-awareness, we're fairly limited with that. When we feel heightened emotion ourselves about a situation, it can be more tricky. How do you approach rapport building? And, I do continue to hear people both face-to-face with each other and virtually, that this, from many people, they do it really well. But many people, they'll still walk into work, go straight to their space, not acknowledge anyone. And the same with the virtual connections, it's straight to business rather than taking the time to genuinely check in and see how people are and what you're actually doing to build rapport. Would you say you're an assertive communicator? as opposed to an aggressive or a passive communicator. And, you know, the best description I've come across in terms of being assertive, you're showing respect for yourself and others as part of how you communicate. So would you say you're mindful of that? You know, not saying something when something really needs to be discussed. That's not appropriate either. Shouting at people about something isn't either. So trying to get that balance right. So that's encouraging you to think about, do you show up around all of those things? So again, you know, lots of great points that are on there that would, I'd like to think, be consistent with that. Right. Now, as part of being in leadership roles, giving feedback is a significant part of the job, both positive feedback and constructive feedback. And ideally, you're in the habit of doing both well and doing both consistently. And again, ideally, if you go to someone in the team, you say, oh, can we catch up? That they're not automatically thinking, what have I done wrong? You know, if you're fairly consistent with catching up with people to pass on good stuff, seeking their opinions about things, having those constructive feedback conversations when you need to, but having that balance, ideally. And I tend to talk about it in terms of constructive feedback rather than negative feedback, or developmental feedback is also a good way to think about things as well. And ideally, you know, that culture that people know where you're coming from and that your intent is positive. And I've put together over time what I call the golden rules for constructive feedback conversations. So I'll talk those through with you now. And this I've put together over time as part of my journey with leading people myself and having to give feedback. And obviously I've been facilitating workshops for a long time as well. So helping people within those workshops, and also with a fair bit of one-on-one coaching work that I do as well. So my recommendations around that are to be well prepared. Now, that saying, failing to plan is planning to fail, that saying has been around for a while. You know, we're going into a more challenging conversation. If we haven't prepared and given it some considered thought, the chances of it going well are fairly hit and miss. Now, if you know the person you're having the conversation with, and you know them well enough to know they'll get upset or they become a bit defensive, whatever else it might be, that you're then prepared for their responses. Being overt around your intent. Now, if it's someone you've worked with for quite a while, the trust is there, they're comfortable with you, they know where you're coming from, you may not need to do it. I do encourage people being mindful, you know, if it's a fairly new working relationship, that you take the time to be overt around your intent and saying something along the lines of, you know, there is something I need to talk to you about. My intent in bringing it up is to share my thoughts, my observations, hear your thoughts and have a conversation around it. And that tends to take a lot of the anxiety for others. And again, the brain potentially going into fight-flight mode. If people are feeling more relaxed, they tend to be much more open to these conversations being productive. Using I language, not you language. Now, seen to be the cornerstone of assertive communication as well. Now, to say to someone, you really annoyed me the other day, not that effective. Whereas I felt really annoyed the other day when such and such happened. So taking the time to acknowledge how you're feeling and articulating that within your conversations certainly well and truly plays its part in building up high levels of trust as well. Trying to keep away from using never and always. And Nina, please know I'm making this up 110%. You're always late. You're never on time. It's very unusual for any of us to operate in those absolutes, and to have someone speak to you like that is not great. Whereas to be able to say, it seems to me that this is happening fairly regularly, and I'd like to have a conversation with you about it. Much more effective. And keeping away from good old but in those conversations, it negates everything that comes in front of it. Now, I'm really pleased with the way you approach this, but. So my recommendation is to pause and have a new sentence. I'm really pleased with the way you've approached this. I'd also like to talk to you about what happened this morning. And only putting something positive in there in the conversation if it's appropriate to do so. You're not making something up for the sake of it. So I'm really pleased. I'd also like to talk to you about, and then people feel they get a balanced approach as well. Oh, you only ever talk to me when something's wrong, when you're not happy about something. Now, they mightn't come out and say that, but they may well be thinking it. So being mindful of that. Also being mindful of not presenting your perspective as truth. Now, as I've already mentioned with the never and always, it's very aligned with that as well. Whereas to be able to say, now, my sense is that you weren't very happy around whatever. So it seems to me my sense is, or I'm wondering, are great ways to open up some of those conversations too. It seems to me that you haven't enjoyed working on this project with whoever, and I'm wondering how you're feeling about it. Now, it might be that, if you've approached me in that way, that I could say, yeah, I'm really not happy, or actually I wasn't very happy, but I've had a good chat with whoever and we're back on track. So again, by presenting your perspective as truth, great way to get people offside, whereas it seems to me my senses are on wondering, much more positive in terms of opening up a conversation. And listen and ask questions. Now, I've talked about listening already, and asking questions got mentioned too. And again, ideally, ongoingly, that we have that awareness. Are you present in your conversations? Are you listening to understand? And being mindful of your body language, your tone, your pace, and your pitch. Now, I've already mentioned the curious rather than furious. And with a lot of the body language, if we're giving someone the look, or we're standing over them, we've got the hand out, whatever else it might be. So ideally, that awareness is there, and providing timely and factual feedback. Now, you may be working closely with someone and they've got a lot on at the time. So you may think, it's probably not best to have that conversation today. That's appropriate at times. At the same time, I encourage people to not have that mindset day after day after day. If someone continues to be busy, but there is something you really need to bring up, being able to say, no, I'm mindful that you are busy at the moment. There is something I need to talk to you about. And the reason I'm bringing it up right now is because, in my opinion, it's really important that we talk about it, so that there's context around that as well. And then factual feedback. To say to someone, I need to talk to you about deadlines. You've missed lots of deadlines. Well, what deadlines have I missed? I can't think of anything specific, but I know you've missed lots of deadlines. That's not helping. Whereas to say, well, this was due this morning, this was due yesterday, it's very hard for anyone and unusual for anyone to argue with fact. So encouraging you to be mindful of those things. So I'm going to give you a few minutes now in breakout rooms with each other to have a share with each other in terms of those golden rules. How many of those do you feel you do well? Are there opportunities to be more effective? What's your mindset when you are approaching conversation that might be more challenging? What do you say to yourself? I'm well prepared here. I expect success. I'm committed to being respectful, whatever else it might be. Or it might be, I hate doing this, so I do it as little as possible. So I'll give you 5 minutes to discuss that with each other. And again, if there's any questions from anyone, if you want to hold on to them till the end, or if there's anything burning when you come back, please let me know. I'll be guided by you. and encouraging honesty with each other as well. Hopefully, Ansi is able to join there. So yes, that could be a conversation that could go on for an hour. I would like to think beyond today.
Yes.
The start of people talking about these things more.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really liked your curious, not furious.
Yes, it's yeah, it's a great one to be aware of. And yes, caring enough to be curious is a term I've come across as well.
So we did have one person had to leave.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, she just got she messaged me. She had a call from her son's school.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of recording things.
Yes.
So I'll give them one more minute.
Hmm.
And beautiful comments there on the chat. I mean, that would suggest to me that there's high levels of self-awareness.
Yes, yeah. I know quite a few of the participants. So some of them are the manager or the CEO, or like department manager, of the specific area of training. Yeah. A couple
Yes,
of
and
my board members, which is nice.
oh, good. And the role modeling, ideally, role modeling in a positive way or not so positive way that
Mm,
goes on in many workplaces. But ideally, that people are saying, yeah, this is best practice, and you see people committed to it.
yeah.
And they're 60 seconds now to finish their conversations. Okay, welcome back to everyone. And, mindful, that's a conversation that could probably go for an hour, and I've given you 5 minutes to have it. and would like to think, there's opportunity well and truly beyond what we're talking about today, to continue some of those conversations with each other. Now, any burning questions, or are you happy to wait till later? Bit of nodding there that would suggest yes, happy to wait till later. Okay, now self-awareness is a big, big part of doing this stuff well, and without it, we are fairly limited. I'm doing more and more work in the emotional intelligence space, and self-awareness is seen to be the foundation skill of emotional intelligence. So that, noticing how we're feeling and then how we are impacting on others. And ideally, that being able to respond rather than react to situations. I'll pop another slide up there as well. And a great term that I've come across a number of years ago, being on the balcony of our own behavior rather than in the dance of it. So, say someone comes to you at work and says, well, why did you do that the other day? Furious rather than curious. And say you feel really annoyed and you react to that. Oh, I can't believe you talked to me about that. You know better. You did da 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 da. Whereas ideally, to stay up on that balcony, someone comes not happy about something and being able to respond to that. It sounds like you're not very happy about that and that we need to have a conversation about it. Tell me a bit more about how you're feeling. Tell me why you think I did or didn't do whatever. What are your thoughts? And ideally then being able to have a considered conversation around that. Now, without self-awareness, as I've already mentioned, we're fairly limited with that. So taking the time to notice our emotions, that helps us then to be able to respond rather than react. And the world of neuroscience tells us that on average, we experience up to 180 emotions per day, and that 85% of that can be happening at an unconscious level. So ideally becoming more aware. Now, if any of you are thinking, whoa, I can only think about 3 or 4 emotions that I experience, the recommendation, excuse me, for anyone who wants to get better at that is to journal. So it does take conscious effort to journal for a month, and the recommendation daily, every 5 hours, to schedule in a few minutes and think about what emotions have I experienced in the last 5 hours, and to capture those, write them, type them somewhere. Then at the end of each week, to look at your list, look at how many were negative, how many were positive, what did you do with them? And doing that then for a month helps us to become much more self-aware, so that we are able then to respond more effectively than reacting to situations. So good things there to be mindful of. Now, in terms of being able to do this stuff well, we need some self-care. And that sense that we can't pour from an empty jug. Now, I can still remember when I was finishing my degree in Dublin, and most of us were heading off to the world of social work, a lecturer saying to all of us, you're going to be filling everyone's glass. What are you going to do to fill your own jug so that there's something in there that you can pass on good stuff to others as well, and you're there for them? Now, I was 20, not quite at the time, but I've still well and truly remembered that. Done a fair bit of work in that space as well, very, very interested in well-being. And the model I'm going to talk through with you now, called the PERMA model. Martin Seligman, Professor Martin Seligman, based in Pennsylvania, he's done a lot of amazing work in this space. And he has come to Australia many, many times as well. And I was very fortunate to attend a presentation he gave, excuse me, at Melbourne Town Hall, probably 10 years ago now. And he talked about the fact that both he and most of his colleagues, most of their work had been done in the mental illness space. And he acknowledged how important continued great work and research is in that space. And then went on to say that until fairly recently, not much work had been done in the mental wellness space. and what we do to look after our well-being. And Martin developed the PERMA model, and he recommends that we live a PERMA lifestyle. And things we need to do then, ideally, to create that. So to take the time in terms of the P part of PERMA, positive emotions, to reflect at the end of each day, what are a few things that went well in my day today, and why did they go well? Now, by doing that every day, it does help the brain to focus on the positives, even though there may be some things that haven't gone well, being able to obviously acknowledge those as well. And it's not around the Pollyanna, isn't life perfect? Some days, as you all know well, it's a long way from perfect. And then at the same time, if we can consider, it might be a pretty crappy day. What's one thing that did go well today? That can help us work through things, come up with solutions. And if you're having days when it's pretty positive the whole way, great for you. The E part of PERMA, engagement. So what absorbs and inspires us? Now to think about that, and days when you think, wow, the day went past so quickly today, that would suggest you're highly engaged with what you're doing. And encouraging people to think, both at work and outside of work, what kind of things are we doing that engages and inspires us? Now, I feel very, very fortunate ongoingly that my work I find very inspiring. I'm also mindful too what I do outside of work, and certain hobbies and food and cooking is something that I really, really enjoy. And, I notice even making some pesto recently, just watching all the ingredients going around in the food processor and being totally engaged in what I was doing. And, knowing how good that is for our well-being too. The R part of PERMA, relationships, and being mindful, of what we do to nurture our relationships. Do you invest in other people? Now, that first activity I asked you to do and putting comment on the chat would suggest that you're all mindful of that. And to have good relationships, I'm sure you all know that we need to invest in them as well. And in terms of work, the term having a blah partner at work, I always think it's like gold. A trusted someone that you can go to and say, can I just vent for 5 minutes? And confidentiality is respected. They don't think any less of you. They'll probably do the same with you next week or maybe the next day. So that, yes, investing in relationships and being there for others. And then in most cases, they're there for you as well. Having meaning in our lives. A little bit of overlap there with engagement. Where do you find meaning in your life? Now, that's different for people as well. Work can be a big part of it, family, community, religion, whatever it might be. So where do you find meaning? And a sense of accomplishment. Now, setting goals is one thing, and ideally we all do it. And in terms of success, I've come across the term, the progressive realization of predetermined, worthwhile personal goals. That gives us that sense of accomplishment. Now, it might be you've set yourself a goal and you've taken 5 steps towards making it happen, that progressive realization. I'm on my way here. This is good. And again, I'm sure you're all mindful too of what that does to motivation when you're feeling that sense of accomplishment. And then what we're doing to look after our health. So our mental health and our physical health. And, the recommendation around that too is that we get into some good habits around all of those things, and encouraging you to think, what current habits do you have in terms of looking after your physical health and your mental health? So encouraging that awareness. So again, a good one to reflect on. And if this give you a minute or two now, anyone who'd like to comment on the chat in terms of anything you do to look after your well-being. You may have come across PERMA, you may not, but I would like to think, anything you are doing, you could find a space within the PERMA model that you think, yeah, that's aligned with that. So yeah, if you're happy to put something onto the chat. Anything anyone does, yes, that you would say it's under the PERMA model? That's beautiful to read, Charmaine. Sounds like some good habits. Yana, you're enjoying the sun when it shines.
Nhưng mà cái vết mấy tờ tí này lại bị lệch nhau, chị tách nó ra rồi. Thế để chị đẩy cái này lên 1 giờ.
And giving yourself time. So well done. And well done, Cassie, with your having your vent people. Saunas, yoga, wonderful. So yes, if anyone else would like to add to that too, we will keep moving along with the content for now. And some additional things to be mindful of in terms of creating a positive environment. Oh, lots of great stuff coming up there as well. Thank you. Now, David Rock has developed what's called the SCARF model. And ideally, working towards the right-hand side and keeping away from what's happening on the left-hand side. So yes, the SCARF model. So he's done and continues to do some great work in the neuro leadership space. And the model would suggest, in terms of looking at the positives in there, with the S part status, do people feel important? Do they feel their opinions matter? As opposed to the negative side of that. You know, say someone comes to you at work and they want to give an opinion around something and you say, oh, it's not up to you. Just go back and do your job. You're not going to feel that your opinion matters. You know, I can still remember I worked with the Body Shop for a long time, and one of the directors, he was very, very good at saying, I don't want people agreeing with me for the sake of it. If you've got a different opinion around what we need to do here, I want to hear about it. And he well and truly walked the talk with that. You know, there were many times in the time I was there that I would have conversations around what we were doing with leadership development. And most times my recommendations went on to become business as usual. Now, sometimes they didn't, but I understood why. Whereas, oh, Paula, you and your ideas, can you just go back in your box? I probably wouldn't have stayed there very long. Certainty. So being upfront with people, ideally, you know, letting them know what's happening. And that's not always easy. And again, you know, if you don't quite know yourself, being able to say, yes, I'm working towards finding out what's going on here. As soon as I do know, I'll be in touch with you about it. As opposed to, oh, well, I've got no idea. No one talks to me about whatever. Things like that. That's not good. Giving people a sense of autonomy. Now, a lovely quote I came across fairly recently. Hire awesome people and then get out of the way and let them be awesome. You know, as opposed to micromanaging. Now, don't do anything unless you check in with me. Not great. And again, in terms of dynamic leadership, it's not helpful. Relatedness. How well do we feel that's going on? Now, if it's being done well, you know, people who might be in different roles are in different roles. Someone might be part-time, someone might be a contractor, someone might be on a contract that's going to finish in 6 months, whatever else might be. Do they feel as much part of the team? Oh no, Paula, you're not going to be here in 3 months' time, so yeah, we're not asking for your opinion around this. No, if you're doing stuff like that, negative in terms of relatedness. And fairness, you know, do people get treated fairly? Is it the one rule for all? And we know what's expected. You know, salary can come into that one as well. Now, I found out I was doing a similar job to one of you that was a colleague, and I found out you're getting paid 20% more than me. Things like that aren't good. And I continue to hear from people that those things do happen in organizations. And workload, what's fair, what's even. And we can get caught into the punishing good performance there as well. Oh, you're really good at what you do, so I'll load you on with more work. Whereas you might be thinking, well, no, other people in the team aren't asked to do as much as me. So ideally, we're focusing on the positives in there, the towards and the rewards and the sense of people feeling good about what it's like to be around you, as opposed to the opposite. Now, I'll also mention the emotional bank account. Now, doing all of this stuff we've talked about already and doing it well in terms of building high levels of trust. So Stephen Covey, if anyone has come across his work, one of his main books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I always feel I need to acknowledge Stephen isn't with us anymore. He did have an accident on his bicycle a number of years ago now and didn't recover from it. The Stephen Covey Institute has gone on from strength to strength. And yes, one of the models that Stephen did develop called the emotional bank account. And he used that as a metaphor with our financial bank account. And I'm sure you'd all agree that in an ideal world, how we like to keep our financial bank account, we're putting in, we're not taking everything out. Comparing that to the trust we have with people, depositing rather than withdrawing. And the recommendation, and Stephen came up with 6 points to encourage us all to be mindful of, taking the time to understand people. Now, when someone's new, talking to them about how they're feeling about the job, what challenges they think they might face, getting to know who people are outside of work too. What do you like to do when you're not at work? And it can be, well, it not just can be, it is, very powerful. If I tell you, oh, I barrack for this football team, or I'm doing this at the weekend, to check in with me on Monday and say, oh, I saw your team got thrashed at the weekend, or you had a good win, or how did the party go, or things like that. And attending to the little things. Now, it might be, you're walking down a corridor somewhere and someone's further down and they're carrying something and they're trying to open a door. You might go and help them, or you might not. So ideally, those little things. And they become the big things if we don't do it. Paula could see that I was struggling to open the door the other day and get through, and she didn't even come and help me, as opposed to someone coming and helping you. Keeping our commitments. Now, if I say, I'll get back to you at 10 o'clock tomorrow, making sure that you do. Being clear with expectations, showing personal integrity, walking the talk, and then apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal from the emotional bank account. Now, it might be I say I'll get something to you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Tomorrow comes and goes, and for whatever reason, I don't. Being able to come and say, I do apologize. I know I said I'll get that to you at 10 o'clock yesterday. I got distracted with whatever. Here it is now. So yes, at any point, if we feel we're withdrawing from the emotional bank account, taking the time to apologize. Now, if we're apologizing every second day for what we're doing, that's not good for trust either. What I've always liked about this model, you can think about anyone in your world and ask yourself, what's the state of play with the emotional bank account? Is there some good trust in there? A bit of interest is being earned. And then, if things don't go so well one day, you're a bit short and sharp, a bit grumpy with someone. If the trust is there already, it's not going to destroy it. Whereas if things are already fairly delicate, we can end up with what Stephen talked about, emotional bankruptcy. We're walking on eggshells, things feel uncomfortable. And, there may well be people in your world, both at work or outside of work, where you feel, never quite know what to expect. So ideally, reflecting on what are you doing to develop high levels of trust with people, and they're great points to be mindful of there. So I'm going to ask you now, all those things we've talked about already, we'll spend a little bit of time now looking at delegation and coaching. So I'm going to ask you to pop onto the chat. What do you do in terms of how do you approach delegation coaching people? Would you say you're interactive, you're prepared, you listen, you ask good questions, maybe you get a bit impatient, or it's not something you do well, you don't have much time, so you think, yeah, it's better if I do it myself rather than attempting to get someone else to do it? So yes, how you currently approach delegation and coaching. So you call upon self-awareness. Oh, Charmaine, that's sounding highly effective. Cassie, yeah, well done there as well. And being mindful of people's capability and timeframes, yes. Being supportive, great points on there. So I will talk through a few slides around that, and then we'll have our time for any questions. Oh, and Sue, yeah, great points on there as well. That's drawing out as opposed to giving them the answers. I've got a great quote coming up that is very aligned with that. So there are many frameworks out there in terms of delegating. And again, in terms of being dynamic leaders, being mindful how you do approach delegation. Just go and do it, not going to help. Whereas ideally to consider, well, what is it that needs to be delegated? And what skills, competencies are required to do it? And then planning that delegation. Well, it would involve, spending time going through this, et cetera, and thinking about, well, who would be the best person right now? Is it someone that's already highly competent, or if there's the opportunity to look at someone who might not be so competent, that will take more time and effort, giving them the opportunity to grow and develop. And then once you've decided who, discussing it with them. And again, lots of good questions and listening in there. How are you feeling about doing this? Where do you feel you're currently competent? Where do you think you need to learn more? What can I do to support you? And being present in those conversations, and then communicating that delegation, letting others know. So Paula's now going to be in charge of this. It frees you up too, because other people will then be coming to Paula. And, if you don't do that, people continue to come to you. And I'm thinking, well, I thought I was supposed to be doing this now, but no one's coming and talking to me about it. So communicating that, absolutely vital. Then monitoring progress and appraising performance. Now, don't expect perfection. First time around is a great recommendation in terms of delegation. It might be something you've been doing for 5 years. And you potentially expect me to be highly competent at it first time around. No, I might be, and that's great, and giving me that feedback. And, if it's not going so well, there might be a few things I've done well. Again, going back to the golden rules, noticed you've done this. I've also noticed that this hasn't been done on time or in line with procedures. So being mindful of those, and being there to support people as well, being available and having those conversations. If you've got any questions around this as you're going through, please let me know. And then with coaching people as well, that helping people towards success. So there's a lot of overlap there with coaching and delegation. And, there's a lot of different models around it. Now, that's thinking too that a coach is something that you be as opposed to do. That how do you show up? Do you come across as someone approachable, respectful, genuinely committed to my development? And if you are coaching someone on a standard operating procedure, good old SOPs as they're called, this is how we do things around here. You're the teacher, you're passing on, this is how we do it. So the show model is highly recommended for that. So you'll set things up. If it is a procedure, you've got the right information. It might be there's a handout or there's a document in some way. You demonstrate how to do it. You check in with me how I'm feeling about it. You give me the chance to do it, and then have a conversation around the what next. Okay, so Paula, I'd like you now to do X tomorrow. I'll come and check in, see how you're going with it, so that people do know. And then there's also the grow model. So a different type of coaching, and so often it's around, professional development, developing confidence, interpersonal skills, and the thinking around grow. The answer lies within the person, and it's your job to bring it out. And in terms of a framework, so what is it you'd like to achieve? Where are you at right now in relation to that? What options do you have? And, as part of that, we can be very tempted to say, well, what you need to do is. Now, if you start doing that, you've thrown the coachee out of the driver's seat. So again, self-awareness is really, really powerful as a result, so to get the right result. And then once options have been considered, asking the person you're coaching, so what will you do? What actions will you take? Now, I've had many, many times over the years when I've had people I've been coaching that would say to me, well, Paula, you've got a lot of experience in this area. What do you think I should do? And I try and be very mindful of saying, pretty much, now I know I've had a lot of experience and I'm happy to share my thoughts in due course. I'd like to hear yours first. And, it continues to delight me in many, many ways that, to be able to then say to someone, well, that's exactly what I would have suggested. And that sense then that they own that because they've come up with it rather than, oh yeah, Paula told me to do it. So encouraging you to have that awareness. And the quote I mentioned earlier on, Michael Stanier, who's done some great work in this space. How to Tame Your Advice Monster is a TED Talk he has put together. He's got some great books, great podcasts, but yes, this is one of my favorite quotes of his. And when we with best intention want to tell people what to do, and the recommendation, trying to tame that mindset. So the insatiable things that fuel our need to offer advice and answers when curiosity and good questions are way more powerful. So, encouraging you to think about, are you in the habit of telling or asking? We'll come back to this one. So mindful of time. Now, any particular questions that anyone has?
So questions could either be just in the chat, or if you wanted to put your electronic hand up, Paula could call on you.
Absolutely. I had a sense, Charmaine, and please tell me if I've got it wrong, that earlier on there was a question coming to mind for you, but I could be wrong.
You know me well, Paula, my expressions. So looking at, the particular one that brings to mind for me is how to tame our advice monster. Very often a person in my line of work, because I do deal in mental health referrals along with other things, people coming to me with a whole bunch of problems, and they see me as a person that would find the solution very quickly, but respectively. How do I tame that inner monster, but giving them back some of that authority to solve some of their own problems when they're at such a vulnerable point and are demonstrating that they don't feel capable?
Yes, yes. And I think exactly what you said there, that you do respect them and their perspective, and possibly along the lines of, I do respect what you've shared with me. And I'm wondering, have you had any thoughts as to what actions you could take?
That's a good advice. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm mindful there. I'm becoming the advice monster almost by telling you rather than yes. And then, potentially, to give someone that opportunity to say, well, I can't think of anything. Then potentially, have you considered this? And have you considered this rather than, well, what you need to do is so much more powerful.
Thank you.
Oh, and, great question on there. So it's looking like no questions there coming through. So I have one final slide that I'll encourage you. Now, this is again the quote on there, Stephen Covey. To know and to not do is to not yet know. And great to see all those lovely comments on the chat that you found it a useful presentation. Really encouraging now to think about what you're going to do as a result of this. So encouraging you to think about beyond, obviously, this time, to schedule in some time to think about what could you stop, start, change, and continue. And if there are other people on here or other people that you know quite well at work, it might be that you share that then with them. Now, the BLA partner that I talked about earlier on, another nice term, an accountability buddy. So potentially, to check in with someone and say, well, based on the presentation, I'd like to do this, or stop doing this. Can I ask you to be my accountability buddy? And my recommendation around an accountability buddy, to ask them to check in with you once a fortnight for the next 2 months and ask you 2 questions. What are you doing differently, and what difference is that making? So they don't need to be lengthy conversations, and at the same time, really powerful with keeping us accountable with what we're doing and committed. And if you're looking at changing, developing habits, that having a check-in once a fortnight, that keeps you very, very focused. So,
oh,
go
sorry.
on.
Oh, Paula, I was just going to thank you for the session. I can see in the chat as well that people have really appreciated your information and your expertise in this area. And I know that for myself, I really liked the curious, not furious sort of model. And going to look into that, the PERMA and the SCARF models just a little bit further, because I think that was new for some of us in our sector. Yeah, really good reflection, I think, for all of us here as leaders and managers. And it's always good to check in, I think, and review our own principles. So thank you very much.
Oh, very, very welcome. And, that opportunity, those of you that work closely with each other, what you do with this now too is the real return on investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Philip is asking to get the presentation notes, so I can sort that out.
Yeah, we can make that happen, so that's fine. Also, this has been recorded, so possibly next week it will be on our member portal. So yeah, you can reflect on that or share that with your other staff as well. So
Great. Well, hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks again, Paula.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.